Hello, I'm Esther Githu-Yuat. It's Wednesday, December 28th. This is Africa 54.
A record drought in Somalia is putting women and girls at risk of gender-based violence and seeing girls pulled out of school. Sierra Leone faces challenges funding education. VOA's Peter Clotter speaks with the country's education minister what they are doing about it. And in our tech segment, Awake Youth Initiative in Kenya works to empower young people to become change makers.
We begin in East Africa, where a record drought in Somalia is putting women and girls at risk of gender-based violence. They are forced to walk further from home to get water and education, making them vulnerable to attacks. Juma Majanga reports from Tugedir in Somalia's breakaway region of Somaliland.
Sunset in Adan Saliban camp for drought-displaced persons in Somaliland brings vile memories to this 35-year-old mother of 6. In November, as her husband was bedridden with illness and she was putting her kids to bed, a man stormed their doorless hut and raped her. She does not wish to use her name due to stigma.
The lamp was still on, and so he saw me and came straight to me and started tearing off my clothes. I tried fighting back, but he overpowered me. Some people later responded to the noise and came to check, but he had already left.
Her case does not appear to be an isolated one in the drought-displaced camp of 2,000 households. Scores of Somali women and girls in the camp approached a reporter wanting to share their stories of being attacked, of fears for their children. Aid workers confirmed the problems of gender-based violence and sexual and gender-based violence. The nearest clinic offering counseling for survivors is almost 100 kilometers away. The Ainaba Health Center says reported cases of GBV from just a few camps have more than quadrupled since the drought to 20 per month, but many more go unreported due to stigma.
We give them psychosocial support. And if the person needs, we refer to legal, and we give them legal support.
Aid workers say the attacks have also worsened access to education, especially for girls. Hadija Kule and her 4 teenage daughters have been in Adan Saliban camp since March after drought killed all their livestock. She says her husband died from the stress. Kule pulled her daughters out of the nearest school, a 5-kilometer walk from the camp, afraid they could be attacked on the way.
Perpetrators are all over the camp, making it very risky for girls and women. I can't even send my daughters out alone. We've tried to form groups, so if they're going to fetch water or firewood, they go together during the day.
Care Somalia says there are 900,000 drought-displaced children at risk of dropping out of school in Somalia, with 43,000 in Somaliland's camp already out, most of them girls. Authorities say they are trying to beef up security, but remote IDP camps like Adan Saliban don't even have power for lights. As the sun goes down, women and girls already suffering from the Horn of Africa's worst drought in half a century, face another restless night. Juma Majanga for VOA News, Togdia, Somaliland.
Clashes in South Sudan killed more than 50 people during 4 days of fighting in eastern Jonglei state. A local official says youth from the Nuer community attacked another ethnic group, but the Nuer had most of the casualties. South Sudanese territory, which gained independence from Sudan in 2011, has been plagued by blood feuds and clashes over cattle and land for decades. The UN peacekeeping mission said last week that armed Nuer youth were being mobilized ahead of a potential raid against the Moro. The UN mission says it was monitoring the escalation of tensions and violence and had intensified patrols in and around the affected areas. Ethiopian Airlines' first flight in 19 months from Addis Ababa to Mekelle since the Pretoria peace agreement was signed in November has landed. The peace deal ended a brutal 2-year conflict between the Ethiopian army and leaders of the Tigray People's Liberation Front. Emotional passengers who could not return to Tigray during the war expressed their gratitude as they prepared to board the flight to reunite with their loved ones.
I lived here in separation from my husband and child whom I love. I came here for my daughter's examination and suddenly got stuck here. When I heard the news about the flights, I fell to the ground and cried. I am extremely happy, and I hope it will continue like this. I pray the peace will be sustained. When there is peace, there is everything.
I'm extremely excited that I'm going to see my sister and my dad. I cannot say more at this time.
This is a joyful moment because we are going to meet our relatives after a long time. I'm very excited. I pray to God that the remaining things like communication and so on will also be addressed soon.
I came here to see my daughter who was giving birth at the time. My plan was just for 2 weeks, and then everything was shut down suddenly. It has been more than a year and a half already. I'm very happy that peace is returning and excited that I'm finally going home. May God keep the peace and things return to be how they were.
Upon arrival at the Mekelle airport in Tigray, passengers kissed the ground, very thankful for the peace agreement that has made their return home a reality. Now, for more reaction on this latest development in Ethiopia, I'm joined live via Skype from Ethiopia's capital by Gilmacho Alemu, a professor at the Addis Ababa University College of Law and Governance. Professor Alemu, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Aster, for having me.
So what does this first flight from Addis Ababa to Mekelle mean for Ethiopians?
Yeah, it's a very nice day for Ethiopians. For ordinary people, it's reconnecting with their families after almost 2 years. For the federal government at TPLF, it's a trust-building measure. So it's a very good day.
So have Eritrean troops have they left Tigray as far as you know, because the peace deal is now in effect?
Yes. The focus on Eritrean troops and third parties, troops from forces from neighboring regions, it sounds like cherry picking because it's part of it should be part of the overall peace process. It shouldn't be the only focus, in my view. But in general, the peace agreement prohibits collusion with third parties. That should be looked into as the peace process, the details of the peace process are being implemented. So
right.
That's how it is, yeah.
Does the peace process, the peace deal include maybe a clause that cushions Ethiopia from outside forces engaging in internal conflicts of Ethiopia itself?
Yes. Both parties, the TPLF and federal government, have agreed not to engage third parties. So that's a general term. And that is, I expect, one of the terms of the agreement that they would implement soon.
Professor, the high-level delegation from Ethiopian government officials arrived in Mekelle Monday. Is there any prospect of any kind whatsoever that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed may be able to have a face-to-face meeting with Tigrayan leader Debretsion Gebremichael?
Yeah, that's a good question. If the peace, the trust-building measures continue like now, why not? It's very possible that delegations would arrive from Tigray and meet the Prime Minister.
We also learned that a few things have been restored. Power lines in Tigray are restored. Their banking services are ongoing now, the phones as well. But do we know if the hospitals are fully operational?
Yeah, I think part of the delegation, the federal government delegation, I assume that they would look into this. But hospitals rebuilding hospitals would take more time because, in banking and other services, it's easier. So international actors like the WHO and other actors are needed to help in rebuilding the hospitals.
And are there plans, Professor, to have this peace deal implemented in a way that there can be discussions of peace process and reconciliation among the Ethiopian people? Because this 2-year conflict has really separated people along ethnic lines.
Yes, it's a very, very painful. It has been a very painful year or 2 years, more than 2 years. So there should be a lot of reconciliation, a lot of discussion, not only with TPLF or in Tigray, but in all over the country. And the ethnicization of politics must stop if we are going to survive as a country.
Professor Girmacho, thank you very much for your insight.
Thank you for having me, Esther.
Girmacho Alemu is a professor at the Addis Ababa University College of Law and Governance. David Senge, Sierra Leone's Minister of Basic and Senior Secondary Education and Chief Innovation Officer for the Directorate of Science, Technology and Innovation, served as a keynote speaker at a panel discussion on the sidelines of the recent U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit here in Washington. VOA's Peter Clotty spoke with Senge for insight on how much Sierra Leone is committing to education.
If you think about how much Sierra Leone commits to education, 22% of our budget. Right. Now, if you think about the aid, the loan, the debt that we have to pay, and with the depreciation of the leones against the dollar, and with the global economic crisis, you see that our 22% does not go as far. So one of the things that we have been speaking about, both on the government side and with our partner side, is how do we engage differently such that Sierra Leone, with its 22% in education, or any other country, that can go further than it currently is going. How do we bring in resources from other sectors to be able to support? And for education in particular, if we're thinking about digital education, there's some private sector organizations who we've been speaking about. If we're speaking about ways of teacher training and technology and these different ways in which we can ensure that people are getting training, are getting the learning outcomes that are desired.
Looking at the 22% budget that the president has budgeted for education, what are some of the success stories you are seeing on the ground? And in the future, how sustainable would this free education be?
I think when you think about how you transform a country, you have to base it on the foundation. In the past, and when you, in politics, bad politics, you take all the money and you build one big pillar. You say, look at that tall pillar that I built in 4 years. What we have done in this government is to say, we need sustainable development. That requires a solid foundation. We dig down into the hole, bring rocks, and put solid multiple core pillars. And so you may not see it go as high, but what we are building is so structured that it doesn't matter, we can only go up. Different people can focus on different sides of the wall because the foundation is solid. That said, we've been able to achieve gender parity within 4 years. There are more girls as boys. This was not the case. We've been able to recruit and train teachers at a scale that has not been done before. Increased teacher salaries by 30%, committed 45% into the future, trained just this past holiday about 12,000 teachers, about 24,000 over the last 2-3 years. New sets of curriculum from basic primary education all the way through to tertiary education, brought in a lot more, committed financing, about $300 million over the next 4 or 5 years, new resources committed to support what we're doing. And one of the biggest impacts with the free quality education, free tuition, school feeding, ensuring that you're able to get transition exams also covered, transportation subsidized, is we now see for the over 100,000 kids pass their transition exams to go to university. Now we have a different challenge. How can you absorb all of them? We can't readily, and we have to think about ways in which we expand into online learning, think about skills development, and the knowledge economy. How do you ensure that kids are getting the right set of skills? And this year, we have more people doing STEM, applying to do STEM than the arts in the university, and more women applying to do engineering than men. And it's just incredible to see these things happen within 4 years.
So what will be the major takeaways of the speech of President Joe Biden, listening to him today, and what will be the major takeaways as you go back to Sierra Leone after the summit?
I think it was great to hear the president talk about new forms of partnership based on our shared future. It was great that the president also spoke about MCC, and Sierra Leone had a meeting with the head of MCC who said how Sierra Leone is one of their most important partners. We are eligible for compact and we're far into developing it, focused on energy. We saw the president speak about technology and innovation. I'm also Chief Innovation Officer for Sierra Leone, and it's great to keep pursuing that. Technology and innovation is going to be the ways in which we transform our economies, not just in America as they have, but also in our various African countries. The focus on youth, the focus on climate, these are all very well in line with our human capital development initiatives that President Bio has.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was David Senge, Sierra Leone's Minister of Basic and Senior Secondary Education and Chief Innovation Officer for the Directorate of Science, Technology and Innovation, speaking with VOA's Peter Clotty. 2022 is coming to a close in just a few days. So what was the most significant issue for you, and what do you hope for 2023? We wanted to hear from our viewers across Africa. Here are two from Ghana.
For me, I consider the economic situation right now as the most important issue facing Ghanaians in 2022. So we hope moving forward, things are going to be resolved with the way the city is depreciating, fuel prices and all. I think from that, it will be better in 2023.
For me, I consider the economy. It's been 2022 is one of the worst economy I've ever experienced. Looking at the inflation thing that's going to happen, the dollar rising, it makes, living condition of Ghana to be very worse. I have never experienced this kind of hardship before in my life, honestly.
People on the streets of Accra, Ghana, sharing with us issues they considered important to them in 2022. We'd like to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, empowering young people to become change makers. But first, Heidi Adams tells us what's on tap for Wednesday's Straight Talk Africa.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, we'll review the stories that made headlines in 2022, from conflict in Eastern Europe and East Africa to a global economic downturn. How did the developments in 2022 shape the relationships between Africa, the West, and the rest of the world? Join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
In other news, South African police recorded more than 4,000 cases of kidnapping for ransom or extortion between July and September. That's a twofold increase over the same period last year. Most cases of kidnapping in South Africa are a side effect of carjacking, robberies, and rapes. Anti-crime activist Yusuf Abramjeh says the number of kidnappings today are, quote, the highest ever in the history of South Africa. A new 21-page United Nations report on the conflict in Eastern Congo reveals scores of killings, torture, rapes, and abductions perpetrated against civilians. The M23 insurgent group is being blamed. And Moroccan film director Mariam Touzani hopes her latest film, The Blue Kaftan, shortlisted for an Oscar, will provoke a healthy, much-needed debate around LGBTQ rights and challenge taboos in the conservative country. Pope Francis says the former leader of the Catholic Church, Pope Benedict, is very sick. Speaking during his general audience, the Pope Francis asked for special prayers for Benedict. Vatican spokesman Matteo Bruni says Benedict's health is deteriorating due to advancing age. The 95-year-old Benedict resigned in 2013, citing, among other things, his declining physical and mental health. He became the first pope to resign from the papacy in 600 years. Farmers produce about 1/3 of the world's food, yet they lack global visibility and face many obstacles getting their crops to larger markets. A new app is helping to change that for some farmers in Africa. VOA's Julie Tabo explains.
Eva Bimolel, an onion farmer in Tanzania, used to sell her produce only locally. But now she's grown her customer base through Agramobile, an app that lets her market her goods to buyers beyond her hometown.
We now avoid middlemen who used to fix the price. Now, through the Agramobile app, we are receiving big profits since we can sell our goods to buyers directly.
Small farmers produce about 1/3 of the world's food, so making their goods more accessible to additional buyers is crucial at a time of global concerns about food security. The U.S. Department of Agriculture Foreign Agricultural Service has been supporting their expansion in Africa.
We really like the way that it brought together buyers and sellers and transporters and increased the efficiency for producers.
Which is the vision behind the app, says its founder, Andrew Mack.
It's designed for anybody who wants to make that connection between a small producer and the outside world.
While the app is free to the farmer, Agramobile makes money by providing data about crops to larger buyers. All farmers need is a smartphone to download the app, set up a quick profile, and post their product on the platform. Agramobile can then track when the goods have been planted and when they're ready for sale. Buyers and sellers can message each other over the app. Lady Sanabria Arias used Agramobile to find a new producer of guava from a different region of Colombia for her company's popular guava snack.
To date, we have made 35 purchases, about 1,000 baskets of red and white guava.
Apps like Agramobile are giving small farmers a foothold in a larger market to help feed an ever-growing population. Julie Tabo, VOA News, Washington.
In our technology report, change makers in Africa are not presidents and policy makers, but ordinary men and women who do extraordinary things to create change in their communities using art, skills, voices, and technology. The Awake Youth Initiative in Kenya is working to empower young people to become change makers. Africa 54 technology correspondent Paul Ndiho spoke to Meshach Otieno, founder and CEO of Kenya-based Awake.
Welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
You are a young man on a mission trying to empower a lot of young people across Kenya. Tell us about some of the initiatives that you are leading or you are working on.
Passionate about leadership and young people, I started Awake Youth Initiative. And just even more than that, Africa's future progress or lack of it is extremely linked to what is happening in Africa's higher learning institution, it is presumed. 10% of young people in sub-Saharan Africa are tapped into these universities. This percentage is so small, and they're believed to be the next leaders, the next engineers, the next professionals in the education space, in the health sector, and in the private sector. But then what happens to the 90% of the untapped youth population in Africa? Will they grow up to be leaders, to be transformative in their communities, to be ethical change makers, to tailor solutions that promote, sustainable communities? So it is with this motivation and part of my story that we set out to start Awake Youth Initiative in 2015 with the vision of transforming youth livelihood and leadership in underserved communities. So our number one program at Awake is Awake Lead Young. This is a 5-month leadership and entrepreneurship program that focuses on raising young change makers with the skills of leadership, empathy, teamwork, and change making.
There are people who have made this argument, and they seem to suggest that what's lacking on the continent is not the human capital or the skills, but we have a leadership crisis. We have leaders who have been around for a long time. Some of them don't want to go anywhere to give room for young people. We also have leaders who are not visionary. We have leaders who just worry about their stomach and their families rather than worrying about the concerns of young people. From your vantage point, you interact with a lot of young people. Does that make sense?
The difference between that narrative and the now narrative is that this generation of young leaders, they are woke. They actually are learning from what the previous leadership has given. And so they are changing, they are coming up with new style of leadership, what in our context now we call new leadership. So they are intentionally and more passionately working towards transforming their communities ethically. And so there is, yes, totally a new breed of leadership that is being brought out by this young generation, having learned from what has happened in the previous leadership.
There are people who also argue that social media, in tandem with the changing demographics, has given young people the opportunity to do what they really have to do. In your particular case, you interact with a lot of them. How has social media or the advent of the internet or technology played a role?
Young people, even for our work at Awake, social media plays a steering role in ensuring that we implement our intervention, from having our mentorships online, and some of our virtual trainings online, connecting with mentors across the world, digitally. And so digital has played a very crucial part in ensuring that our intervention, meets its goal. But also in the case of young people are very influential on the social media spaces. And they use these as a tool to really rally around people for change. And so whether they are in the tech space, innovating apps, from what I've seen our team makers do, or they are in the social media spaces, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, actively engaging in activism spaces for women, for other communities, marginalized communities, and all that. Social media has played a steering role in supporting the initiatives and the ventures of young people, not just in Africa, but globally.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Paul.
That was Africa 54's Paul Ndiho speaking to Meshach Otieno, founder and CEO of Awake. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.